My name is Alex Irune, and I'm Chief Operating Officer for Oando Energy Resources. The current change in oil price, if we just dial back a little bit, really has been precipitated by a range of factors that we all couldn't have predicted. If I go back to 2018, what we forecasted was a 2019 with an uptick in oil price, looking at increased demand from Asia and growth acceleration through Africa largely. Now, what was paramount through the year was a stalling of that forecast or that prediction. We saw softer oil prices. We also saw the Asian countries not particularly grow as quickly as we anticipated, and as well Africa. So we came into the end of 2019 with oil hovering between $50 and $55. So we already had a quite a fragile situation there. And of course, we were hit by the pandemic, which started in China, the engine room for consumption across the world, and we saw, activity halt in that region. As the pandemic moved across the world, we saw a demand destruction that effectively wiped out about 15 million to 20 million barrels of the market as I speak today. Now, I think that was already a dire situation. When you combine that with the actions of Saudi and Russia through the 7-week decimation of the oil price, we found ourselves in a much worse or worsened situation. And we've seen a reversal to some degree. We're seeing all around the between $30 and $35 at the moment, primarily because of the actions OPEC were able to take to cut about 9.7 million barrels from the market. For Nigeria itself, it's about 22% of our total production. And invariably, we're producers out of Nigeria, so that certainly impacts us as a company. You speak about the vision, and I think to answer your question directly, we are not deterred from that vision. That vision is still very clear to us, and it's something we still intend to attain. We see the current pandemic and the actions being taken to ease economies back into functioning status as the outlet for improving the market. So we're seeing China largely go back to its production lines. Factories are back up and running. Yes, not at full capacity across the entire region, but we're starting to see a lot of progress there. We're seeing economies in the United States, in Europe, start to open up slowly. And we're also seeing the same happen in Africa. I live in Lagos, and we're certainly, this is our 3rd week of easing that lockdown, and we're starting to see business activity sort of pick up. We know the drivers for demand must kick in to deal with the excess supply, which has fundamentally impacted the oil price. And we see this happening in the short to medium term. And we see the prices bouncing back to relatively good numbers by 2021, 2022. I think the COVID-19 pandemic would certainly accelerate the repositioning of the Nigerian economy. But it's important to note that prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources had tagged 2020, the year of gas for the nation. The idea here is simple: investment in gas, policies to drive gas development and utilization, enhancing the economy of Nigeria through the leverage contribution of gas. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, the activities and the actions or intentions were already in place before the pandemic. But yes, you're right, that the pandemic certainly would accelerate that process. Most importantly, the pandemic would allow us focus on ensuring that the golden goose, or the goose that lays the golden egg rather, is kept safe. We're seeing more optimization come into the oil space. We're seeing large capex cuts in the last 2 weeks globally. We see about 9 billion cut out of capex. This isn't from a global perspective, and totally across the world. I think there's somewhere in the region of 80 to 100 billion dollars of capex that has been cut down just based on the issues around the pandemic. So certainly we're seeing projects being slowed down there. But what is perhaps more useful for the long term is on the operating cost side. We're seeing significant cuts there. We're seeing more efficiencies brought in, and that for me would translate into a lower cost of operation and lower cost of production, right? And when it comes to Nigeria, this is certainly something we need to tackle. Ultimately, you utilize what you have to create what you don't have, and I think when you look at Nigeria specifically, that challenge is clear. We do need to reduce our cost of operation. We do need to be more efficient in how we evacuate the oil from the ground and get it to a sell point. And more importantly, redistribute that value across the nation for diversification, but most importantly, harnessing of gas to support the economy. I think Nigeria is doing what it can at the moment to diversify its economy. A significant amount of capital has been put into the agriculture sector, and the manufacturing sector and other sectors within the economy. Largely, what you would find is for every dollar you put in there, you may not get the level of productivity and output that you desire to move the economy in the right direction at the speed you want to do that. A lot of the deficiencies sit around, a more enabling environment. We know that we could do better when it comes to policy. The PIB is a great example. We've seen in recent times that gain a little bit more momentum, but it's been over a decade to pass the most important bill for a monoproduct economy like Nigeria. I mean, that isn't good enough, full stop. But what we see today is a government that is willing to drive things forward and take those tough decisions. So the PIB has been broken up, and we're seeing the first part of it, make its way through, and hopefully see the other three components come through in very good time. This is our hope. On the utilization side, or the activity side, we're seeing the government fast track projects to enable gas utilization and gas transportation across the nation. The AKK pipeline, takes gas from the south all the way to the north. We see the OBOB pipeline, which takes gas from the west part of the country to the east, and vice versa. And we have the ELPS, which is the Escravos-Lagos pipeline, which has been, its capacity is being doubled at the moment from 1.1 BCF to about 2 BCF. So all in all, we see the government focusing on infrastructure projects to improve gas transportation and utilization across the country. And that for me is the beginning. That for me is where we start to create the availability, first and foremost, to tap into those gas resources as the transport networks allow the gas move around, and we can then create the industries we desire from that. The government, has been active across the Bank of Industry, and various other government parastatals in encouraging small and medium-sized businesses, supporting them with loans. But we know that, this is going to get harder in the period of COVID, where the government revenues and the budgets have been significantly impacted by the low oil price and the oil glut currently that's forcing a 60 to 70% deficit in the government's budget. We enter into this new reality. I mean, we're dealing with a sector that's perhaps seen the third collapse in the last 12 years. So I think whilst we've seen those different seasons. None has been quite as traumatic as this. I certainly haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime as a professional, where we have the confluence of a pandemic as well as a demand destruction, and combined with a supply glut. Now, in theory, the solutions tend to be simple. Once demand picks up, the supply itself would be burned through, and then we go back into an equilibrium position where oil probably hovers between the 50s and the 60s, and we're able to maintain the year-on-year 1 to 1.5 million barrel addition to demand, and that sort of might be the prognosis in theory, but in practice, there's certain things that have occurred through this pandemic or this reduced oil price environment. We've seen the shale producers in the United States have to shut down production and shut down wells. We've seen capital projects take a hit. Let's not also forget we're coming out of a season from 2014 where we had put capital projects on hold for almost 2 to 3 years. So that's 2014, 15, 16. 2017 saw the regeneration or the introduction of large-scale capital projects as oil prices became more sensitive to those projects, and certainly 2018. So going back into this stalled position again means that there's a global reserve to replacement ratio, that discussion that we need to have, right? Okay. It is my anticipation that we might start to see globally reserve to replacement ratios that are somewhat lopsided to the reserve side, and less replacement over time, or the ability to replace in the near future. So that's one conversation. I think that the second thing we need to focus on is, as we bend down and turn off these wells across the world, whether in the States, United States, or in other countries, there is a cost for bringing them back on in the event they do actually come back on. And when they don't, there's certainly an additional cost to get them either to be worked on and overhauled and the likes. So for me, there is a cost that we need to consider in bringing the oil back on in the event the demand actually does spike and become significant. People start to travel around the world, large-scale manufacturing kicks off, and we have logistics and large ships moving around as we used to do it pre the pandemic period. So when you look at all of those things, we're staging a potential demand-driven situation that will need a response. And I believe that in responding to that is where the things that have changed from the pandemic period will become critical. The first is efficiencies and productivity, right? We are seeing more efficient ways of doing things, collaborations on supply chain, collaborations in utilization of infrastructure across a multitude of oil companies. We're seeing more efficiencies with regards to operating modes of operation, so operating approaches. We're also seeing a lot of local companies, at least, and independent companies, look at their staff strength and analyze what really can be done digitally versus what has to be done with human resources and physical presence. So we will see those efficiencies get built in. The second part we will see is the technology landscape that has come to improve our ability to do the work we do whilst we have to maintain social distancing. Robotics, the Internet of Things, large-scale data repositories that exist, and on the geology side also, I see some changes there with automation and heuristic models that can help model and evaluate what's below the surface. When you combine all of these things, the future really speaks to a more efficient, a more productive industry, with changes that have been forced through, the living through the period of COVID, and certainly improving the ability of the industry to maintain low cost across its barrel productions and exploration. The industry in Nigeria specifically has always impacted its host communities. I mean, we for one, as an oil and gas company, are heavily involved in the communities we operate in, whether it be schools or hospitals, building roads, supporting and providing jobs for the community, people eligible to work. These are activities that we do as a matter of a normal course of business. Now, what the pandemic has done is made us realize that in doing that, the impact of the pandemic itself inevitably would have created a larger need in those communities. 70 to 80% of the workforce in Nigeria, is really driven by small businesses. They tend to also be about 60% of that tends to be informal. So when you have a situation like this where there's a huge demand destruction, those small-scale businesses tend to suffer, and the first thing they do is to let people off, because that typically is the largest fixed cost that they carry. Now, we looked at this from an internal perspective, and whilst there are a lot of efforts with regards to COVID and supporting the response to COVID, which the Nigerian National Oil Company has led in Nigeria alongside its partners, one of them being ourselves, contributing in excess of $50 million to that response, providing PPE, building laboratories and sort of contamination and containment centers. We've also been able to donate vehicles, and sort of ambulances and various support equipments that will be utilized in the fight against COVID. The humans of Oando have created TAP, the aggregator platform, which is a platform that is designed to effectively connect donors with the boots on the ground. These are the people that provide the last mile solution. I mean, it's not news to us that prior to COVID, non-governmental organizations and individuals in their personal capacity already did this work, and what we effectively have put together here is a platform that aggregates the most competent across the different local governments in the states across the country, and we're able to fund them directly to augment the work that they currently do, and also manage, monitor, and govern the process in which they deliver this, this support. We're able to record this. We're able to provide evidence of the fact that the finances are used in an appropriate way. And for us, this is our way of saying, we're in this for the long run, and we intend to eradicate hunger from Nigeria, full stop. Yes, I mean, I certainly have been surprised. We've seen certainly a mental shift in our expectations when it comes to meetings, especially in Nigeria. We are able to interact a lot more collaboratively, utilizing the available digital tools. It's unimaginable the amount of meetings we have today in relation to the travel and cost of that travel that would have been incurred otherwise. I mean, I think this is a revelation for a lot of the professionals in Nigeria, the government, and generally the large institutions and and authorities within the country. A lot more can be done more efficiently. For me, that's the big thing that stands out. I think we've also been able to understand the relationship between productivity and distant working, and we've been able to sort of, the objectives don't work the same way, the expectations don't work the same way, and the touch points certainly don't work the same way. So we've had what is into our 10th week now, an exercise in defining what those new objectives look like, defining what the interaction must be and what the support structures must be to ensure that people remain productive, people remain, within the behavioral expectations and the culture of the organization. All of this has taken quite, a steep curved learning process for us, but it's been the most enlightening thing for me.